Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Jazz speaks for life." You know, the arts have always had a strong connection to the civil rights movement. Music especially became a powerful way to send cultural and political messages, either in protest or celebration. So thank you for joining us on our 4th annual Sixth and Jazz program, Let Freedom Ring, supported by Advent Health and other generous sponsors. I'm Laura Peet, Director of Education at the Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts. And from all of us here, we hope you enjoyed this show, performed by our very own jazz orchestra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sterling Stevenson. I'll be leading you through today's show, Let Freedom Ring. Today, we're going to share with you some of the history of jazz, America's most indigenous music. I can't do this all alone, so I believe I'll call on some help. I believe I'll call on the Jazz Orchestra at the Dr. Phillips Center under the direction of Rodney Whitaker, accompanied by Raquel Whitaker. Today's program is going to focus on the civil rights movement and the jazz musicians' role during that era. I'm going to need you to keep on your thinking caps. Some of the things we'll discuss today aren't so pleasant. However, they're a part of our history, the history of this music, jazz, and the African Americans' contribution to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was a time where great change was needed. It was a time in the United States where equality was sought after by everyone. This time period that we'll look at today begins in 1954 and ends in 1964. It seems perfectly obvious to me that jazz musicians would put their marks on this movement. And the reason why I say that is because jazz musicians were struggling to get their message accepted throughout the world. It's only been in recent times that this great music has found its place in the musical canon of America. It was well known throughout the world, yet hesitantly accepted here in the United States. It wasn't highly respected, yet it was bound to make its mark in this nation. Not everyone approved of this music because it crossed so many cultural boundaries. In the end, the music won. It had heart. It was the foundation of all music here in America, from bluegrass to rock and roll. I want you to listen closely to today's presentation and take the best lessons of these jazz musicians and how they worked to let freedom ring. Jazz musicians traveled all over the United States trying to gain the acceptance of their music. During their travels, it was obvious to them that things needed to change. They were forced to stay in segregated hotels and often even stayed in private homes. There were many musicians who were committed to the cause of change, the change of the civil rights movement. Some of these artists included Charlie Parker, Max Roach, and Oscar Brown, Charles Mingus, Dave Brubeck, and Herbie Hancock. Oh yeah, there was also Nina Simone, whose piece you heard at the opening of today's performance. These artists used their talents to support this movement. Nina, for example, used her music to break down racial and social barriers. You'll learn more about the societal impact of all these musicians throughout today's show. We're going to begin today's show with the African American anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. Everyone knows that the national anthem of the United States is the Star-Spangled Banner. However, Lift Every Voice and Sing was composed and arranged so African Americans could voice their struggle through song. And now I'll ask Raquel to lead us in this song, accompanied by the Jazz Orchestra at the Dr. Phillips Center. Please stand and show respect for this anthem. Thank you. Please be seated. The next composition, Now Is the Time, is a song written by Charlie Parker. Parker was committed to the idea that things had to change. He was aware of the social conditions people were forced to live under, and this tune sounds like he was deciding to draw a line in the sand and say that enough is enough, and things had to change. He was a gifted intellectual who also enjoyed socializing. It's stated that one day while shooting pool, some fellow artists were saying, "I wonder who could do best at what?" Charlie Parker immediately interjected and said, "Don't go there. There's no room for competition in art. We all have our place and can make our marks with this beautiful thing called art. There's no competition when it comes to art. Everyone gets to create this music. Everyone is free to make this art." Here's an example of Charlie Parker's art. It's a piece called Now Is the Time, sung by Raquel Whitaker.
Reminisce me and think about the bird. Remember everything you did and all the things you heard. Don't it just amaze you? Get you down to and think about the bird. Remember everything he did and all the things you heard. Don't it just to measure, get you down the side to think of how he had to live and then the way he died. Life was so kind, 'cause now would have been his time. Now is the time. Come reminisce with me and think about the bird. Remember everything he did and all the things you heard. Don't it just to measure, get you down inside to think of how he had to live and then the way he died. Life was so unkind, 'cause now would have been his time. Come reminisce with me and think about the bird. Remember everything he did and all the things you heard. Don't it just to measure, get you down inside to think of how he had to live and then the way he died. Life was so kind, 'cause now would have been his time. Now is the time.
The next musician I'd like to talk about is Charles Mingus. Mingus was born in Nogales, Arizona, and raised in Los Angeles, California. When he was a teenager, he wrote 2 classical compositions and was considered a child prodigy because of his musical genius. He played the cello and was going to make a living playing in an orchestra. While in high school, Charles had a friend named Buddy Collette, who went on to become a well-known jazz bassist. Budding told Charles that because of segregation and the lack of African American musicians in orchestras, that Charles should forget about playing in an orchestra. He should instead learn to play the bass, and he could get a job working as a professional jazz musician. So Mingus did just that. He became quite a virtuoso on the bass. Charles Mingus never forgot the feelings he had about how discrimination and segregation kept him from living his early childhood dreams of playing in a symphony orchestra. Because of this, for the rest of his life, he fought for equal rights. Mingus wrote a song about Governor Phillips of Arkansas. Governor Phillips was the man who stood in front of the school doors to keep 9 kids in Little Rock, Arkansas, from going into the school. It didn't work. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a former military general who believed in desegregation, sent soldiers down to Little Rock to escort the Little Rock 9 into the school. 9 students who did their best to let freedom ring, the Little Rock 9. Here's Charles Mingus' composition, Fables of Phillips. next song, Freedom Day, was written by Max Roach in a collaboration with Oscar Brown Jr. and sung by Abbey Lincoln. Max was an important contributor to the development of the jazz style bebop. He was right there with Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. He was a highly technically evolved drummer as well. He always had a strong consciousness. He worked with Oscar Brown Jr., a young African-American vocalist and avid civil rights activist from Chicago. Oscar wrote a song called Brown Baby that he performed on the Today Show in the 1960s. His performance moved the nation. Throughout his life, he was committed to the civil rights struggle and worked with youth in the city of Chicago. Do you know who inspired the song Freedom Day? It was Thomas Jefferson. Now, we all know that Thomas Jefferson was a great man who wrote the Declaration of Independence, and it states that all men are created equal. We also know that Thomas Jefferson was a great man with great contradictions about his life. He wrote about equality, yet he owned slaves. But there's a lesson for us in the end. Thomas Jefferson's contradiction was huge, but he still made a great contribution to the world. Our job is to make positive contributions to the world while shrinking our own contradictions. Oscar Brown Jr. passed away in 2005. Max Roach passed away in 2007. This song is for Max and Oscar and all the work they did to let freedom ring.
Whisper, listen, whisper, listen, whisper, say we're free. Rumors flying, must be lying, can they really be? Can't conceive it, can't believe it, but that's what they say. Slave no longer, this is Freedom Day. Freedom Day, it's Freedom Day. Go those shackling chains. whisper, listen, whisper, say we're free. Rumors flying, must be lying, can it really be? Can't conceive it, can't believe it, but that's what they say. Slave no longer, this is Freedom Day. Freedom Day, it's Freedom Day. Throw those shackles and chains away. Everybody that I see says it's really true, we're free. It's Freedom Day.
The next composition is a song called Traveling Blues, and it's written by Dave Brubeck. Dave Brubeck was raised on a ranch in California, and it wasn't one of those well-to-do ranches. Things weren't always so rosy. Dave Brubeck's inspiration for joining the civil rights movement came from his father. His father had a friend who was a former slave, and one day while in conversation, this friend raised his shirt to show the scars left from his punishment while he endured slavery. Dave Brubeck's father said to him, "Don't allow this to happen to any other human being." Brubeck had an African-American bass player named Eugene Wright from Detroit, Michigan. Now, Eugene was African-American. However, the rest of the band was white. Dave Brubeck refused to take his band south, where his bass player would face the problems of segregation. I think that says a great deal about Dave Brubeck. He remained committed to working for human rights throughout his entire life. So, to honor him, Raquel Whitaker, take us away with Traveling Blues.
Travel across the country, some with lots of bands, played in those big cities that really like to dance. Lonesome man, I'm weary, I know the scene so well. Blues have come to get me and to drag me, but oh well. I keep traveling, what if I got to lose? Yes, I keep on traveling, trying to unravel all my blues. Wake up every morning, wonder where I'm at. Look into the mirror and ask myself who's that. Left behind a good one, a face I can't recall. And yet I love my old one. Oh, no man's be loved at all. But I keep on traveling. What if I got to lose? Yes, I keep on traveling, trying to unravel all my blues. Check into a hotel, then forget its name. Oh, I can ask, but oh well, on no hotel's just the same. Sink into the mattress, pray God my soul to keep. Blues are in the street, cries that haunt my
Dave Brubeck truly was an inspiration. The next composition, I Have a Dream, was written by Herbie Hancock as a tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Herbie Hancock, like a lot of the people we've discussed today, was a very gifted and talented young musician. At only 13 years old, Herbie made his musical debut as a soloist playing Mozart with the Chicago Symphony. He went on to become a very famous jazz pianist and composer. One of his most famous compositions is the song that pays tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, Dr. King, as some of you may or may not know, is that he didn't actually start the civil rights movement. In this snapshot of time, we're looking at the civil rights movement began upon Rosa Parks' refusal to move to the back of that bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Well, something had to be done. Things had to change because folks were tired. They were tired of the way things were, and they demanded change. And so the ministers in the community, along with Mrs. Parks, decided that their legs were tired for the last time. They were tired of not being able to ride in any section except the colored section. They had put a lot of energy into this struggle, and for a long time, but now, young legs needed to carry on this struggle. Well, there just so happened to be this young minister in town, and they decided that he was the one to carry on the cause. The funny thing is, he didn't know it. What they did, they went around and talked in groups amongst themselves and planned a big meeting. After everyone was involved and got on board with this meeting, they finally approached Dr. King and asked, "Hey, would you like to attend this meeting for change?" Dr. King said, "Well, sure." And that's when he was informed, "That's great because it's going to be at your church." And that's how he became the leader of the Montgomery bus boycott. Dr. King had several important influential people against him. Some of these people included the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, as well as the President of the United States at the time, Lyndon B. Johnson. What was so important about Dr. King is that he changed the world without firing a shot. Not one shot was fired. Now, if you don't think there's a connection between Dr. Martin Luther King and this music, think about it like this. This music has brought itself from the infancy of slavery, from its blues and gospel roots to the loftiest places in the world, and never fired one shot. It's never argued or fought about with anyone. It just kept right on its road and did what it had to do. And here we are with this music today, this great blessing, this wonderful music. Now, the way I see it, Dr. King had to be a blues man. With so many burdens and struggles on his shoulders, he had to have the blues, wouldn't you? Now jazz is exported to the world. For the particular struggle of the Negro in America, there is something aching in the universal struggle of modern man. Everybody has the blues. Everybody longs for meaning. Everybody needs to love and to be loved. Everybody needs to clap hands and be happy. Everybody longs for faith. In music, especially this broad category called jazz, there's a stepping stone toward all these. These are the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And now, I Have a Dream by Herbie Hancock. This music comes from a sad and troubled place, yet it's given us something beautiful, this gift called jazz. This gift from African Americans is used to inspire so many victims who've had to persevere and overcome so many obstacles. This has been the Jazz Orchestra at the Dr. Phillips Center with Raquel Whitaker. I'm Sterling Stevenson. Friends and family, we're going to close with a piece that has become the theme song of people who've had to overcome so many obstacles. Feel free to join Raquel as she leads us in We Shall Overcome.
We shall